Today, in the media conference with Lal Goyal, which is brought to you by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Newsgaon se Samvad Sarokar News, Organ Donation India Foundation and Gyan. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic. Our today's topic is current and very, very relevant. And the topic is judicial activism in India. But before I will go on my main topic, I would like to inform you that today world is celebrating World Telecommunication Day. World Telecommunication and Information Society Day, WTISD, is celebrated annually on May 17th to highlight the importance of telecommunication. This day is being celebrated since 1969 to mark the founding of ITU and the signing of the first International Telegraph Convention in 1865. Ever since COVID-19 hit the globe, the importance of telecommunication and information society has grown. This year, the theme of this day is accelerating digital transformation in challenging times. Today, we are also observing World Hypertension Day. Hypertension is another name of high blood pressure that can lead to severe health complications such as heart attacks, strokes, dementia, chronic kidney disease, and vision loss. People who suffer from hypertension are generally not aware because there are no specific symptoms to detect the early stages of this disease. So to spread awareness among the people, every year on May 17th, World Hypertension Day is observed. This day was initiated by the World Hypertension League, WHL, which itself an umbrella to organizations of 85 national hypertension leagues and societies. World Hypertension Day was first celebrated on May 14, 2005. However, since 2006, the day is being celebrated on May 17th. This day comes into being to initiate the awareness of hypertension as people do not have appropriate knowledge regarding this disease. This year's theme is Measure Your Blood Pressure Accurately, Control It, Live Longer. Media conference with Lal Goyal wishes you on World Telecommunication Day as well as on World Hypertension Day, and hope that more and more awareness will be created on this day about hypertension so that many lives can be saved. Now coming to our main topic, that is judicial activism in India. Judicial activism is a judicial philosophy holding that the courts can and should go beyond the applicable law to consider broader societal implications of its decisions. It is sometimes used as an antonym of judicial restraint. It is usually a pejorative term, implying that judges make rulings based on their own political agenda rather than precedents and take advantage of judicial discretion. The definition of judicial activism and the specific decisions that are activists are controversial political issues. The question of judicial activism is closely related to judicial interpretation, statutory interpretation, and separation of powers. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. introduced the term judicial activism in a January 1947 Fortune magazine article titled The Supreme Court 1947. A judiciary is an independent body that is even-handed, unbiased, and unprejudiced. It functions within the framework of the Constitution defined under the concept of the separation of powers. It interprets the Constitution, which is supreme and at times needed, supports the rule of law and the standards laid down in the Constitution. The Supreme Court of India is considered the sentinel qui vive and protects the fundamentals and constitutional rights of the people. Judicial activism means the rulings of the court based on political and personal relations, rational and prudence of the judges presiding over the issues. It is a legal term referring to court rulings based in part or in full on the political or personal factors of the judge rather than current or existing legislation. According to Black's Law Dictionary, judicial activism is a philosophy of judicial decision making whereby judges allow their personal views about public policy, among other factors, to guide their decisions. Judicial activism in India implies the authority of the Supreme Court and the high courts, but not the subordinate courts, to declare the regulations unconstitutional and void if they breach or if the legislation is incompatible with one or more of the constitutional clauses. A court giving a new meaning to the provisions to suit the changing social or economic conditions or expanding the horizons of the rights of the individual is said to be an activist court. The Supreme Court of India in its initial years were a technocratic court, but slowly began to become more active through constitutional interpretation. The court became an activist through its involvement, interpretation of law and statutes, but the whole transformation took years and it was a gradual process. The origins of judicial activism can be seen in the court's premature and early ascertain regarding the essence and nature of judicial review. Judicial activism has always been a source of heated debate, particularly in the light of recent developments in this regard. In the last few years, with several controversial decisions, the Supreme Court judges, as well as the numerous high courts, have again triggered a debate that has always been very strong. However, what the word judicial activism actually connotes is still a mystery. Under the Indian Constitution, the state is under the prime obligation to ensure justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity in the country. In this sense, the Indian judiciary has been seen as the guardian and defender of the Indian Constitution. Considering its constitutional duty, the Indian judiciary has played an active role whenever necessary in protecting the individual fundamental rights against the state's unjust, excessive, and unequal actions or inactions. The history of judicial activism can be traced back to 1893, when Justice Mahmood of the Allahabad High Court delivered a dissenting judgment which sowed the seed of judicial activism in India. In India, since independence, the judiciary has played a very active role in dispensing justice, beginning with the A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras case 1950 and the Shankari Prasad case, etc. The judiciary remained submissive until the 1960s, with the modern trend of judicial activism beginning in 1973, when the Allahabad High Court rejected the candidature of Mrs. Indira Gandhi. The introduction of public interest litigation by Justice V.R. Krishnan Iyer further expanded its scope. India's judicial activism can be positive as well as negative. A court engaged in altering the power relations to make them more equitable is said to be positively activist, and a court using its ingenuity to maintain the status quo in power relations is said to be negatively activist. Former CGI P.N. Bhagwati once said, I quote, "I shall try to place a few aspects of it before you to demonstrate how through activism we in India have developed our human rights jurisprudence and brought help and succor to the masses of people in the country. Let me first of all make clear what I mean by judicial activism and why judicial activism is necessary in a country like India. One basic and fundamental question that confronts every democracy run by a rule of law is, what is the role of function of a judge? Is it the function of a judge merely to declare law as it exists or to make law? And this question is very important, for on it depends the scope of judicial activism. The Anglo-Saxon tradition persists in the assertion that a judge does not make law. He merely interprets. Law is existing and imminent. The judge merely finds it. He merely reflects what the legislature has said. This is the photographic theory of the judicial function. It has long held the field in England, and its most vigorous exposition is to be found in a speech made by Lord Chancellor Jowett at the Australian Law Convention, where he said, the function of a judge is merely to find the law as it is. The law-making function does not belong to him. It belongs to the legislature. This judicial view, I am afraid, hides the truth of the judicial process. This theory has been evolved in order to insulate judges against vulnerability to public criticism and to preserve their image of neutrality, which is regarded as necessary for enhancing their credibility. It also helps judges to escape accountability for what they decide. They can plead helplessness by saying that it is a law made by the legislature and they have no choice but to give effect to it. The tradition of the law and the craft of jurisprudence offers such judges plenty of dignified exist from the agony of self-conscious wielding of power. And hence, the incredibly persistent attempt on the part of lawyers and judges to convince the people about the truth of the lie that judges do not make law. There can be no doubt that judges do take part in the lawmaking process, and even some judges have now openly avowed their creative role, unquote. This quote was of CJI Justice Bhagwati. Now, India's Attorney General K.K. Venugopal said that judicial activism of the Supreme Court of India is unparalleled in the judicial history of any modern democracy due to the introduction of public interest litigation. He said that though judicial activism, the Supreme Court has done a tremendous amount of good. It has practically tried to wipe away every tears of the underprivileged, disadvantaged, and illiterate sections of the society. So we heard two eminent personalities, legal luminary, who have advocated for the judicial activism in India. Now, to discuss this very, very important topic, that is judicial activism in India, we have a legal luminary brains, those who have experience, those have a knowledge, and those are authority in this field, that is the legal field. I would like to invite my first guest. She is Advocate Jyoti Pawar. Advocate Jyoti Pawar is practicing law for last more than 33 years in Mumbai. She has done Masters in Science and Master in Law. She worked as a special public prosecutor and session judge court, prosecutor in Session Court, Mumbai, and was on teaching faculty of JC Law College. In 1995, she was appointed as additional public prosecutor, High Court, dealing with important criminal writs as well as criminal appeals. Thereafter, in 1999, she was appointed as the head of writ appellate side, which gave her a chance to defend government in high-stakes matters as well as public interest litigations touching social causes. She was in the panel of central government as senior counsel, Mahada, BMC in the High Court, Mumbai. At present, she is practicing in the High Court at Mumbai. We are on our show. Advocate Jyoti Pawar recently, very recently, especially that during the COVID time and during the election petition, we have heard many observations. I will again the word use observations, for which many of the people, many of the lawyers feel that it is nothing but a judicial activism. It's a judicial misadventure. Now, we would like to know, because you being represented the government and you have defended the government in the public interest litigation, so you know what is the ins and outs of the judicial activism, basically because whenever there is a public interest litigation or PIL, such type of observations are bound to come. Many times it comes. So we would like to know from you the judicial activism in India. Advocate Jyoti Pawar, please.
Good morning, Mr. Lal. Good morning, my my fellow panelists, and also good morning to all the viewers who have joined this media conference. Now, this is a subject, judicial activism, today made it very interesting to all the lawyers fraternity. But unfortunately, this is a subject where it can't be limited to 10 minutes or 12 minutes. It requires a long time for debating this, and it is a never-ending debate. Because today, as Mr. Lal said, that today the Supreme Court has come into criticism for taking all the corona cases to them, and that will be called as judicial overreach and not as judicial activism. To start with, the Indian Constitution is made of 3 arms. We all know that. That is legislature, judiciary, and executive. Now, the legislature is the one who frames laws. The legislature frames laws, the judiciary interprets it, and the executive is the person who implements it. Now, if they stick to their own limitations, there can never be such things as judicial overreach or the criticism that is being called for now for Supreme Court. Now, we have the over changing times from now, long time back in 1960s, the judicial activism actually started with Supreme Court. Let me at this stage say that these powers are only limited to High Court under 226 of the Constitution, that is the jurisdiction, and to Supreme Court under Article 13 read with 32. So these powers are not available to the lower courts, and the discrimination lies with the Supreme Court and the High Court. Now, the discrimination has to be used very consciously by both the Apex Court as well as the High Court. Now, what has happened that the times have been changing very fast. In fact, and the court can't be a silent spectator to the changing times. It has to accordingly change the law, also make the law suitable to the citizens and to the changing times. Now, as far as the judicial activism is concerned, it was not there, I would say, before 1960. But it started basically with the Golaknath case, the very celebrated Golaknath case in 1967. Then it was followed by the most celebrated judgment of Kesavananda Bharati case, where the judicial activism once again came into being. Now, judicial activism is the thing that the judges want to show that they are protecting the citizens from the rule of illegality. Now, anything which violates the law or the rules of the Constitution, the Supreme Court and the High Court are supposed to be the custodian of all these laws. Now, when the legislature has taken the responsibility of framing laws, I feel that the Supreme Court and High Court has to keep in mind that they don't have to trample on each other's powers. Now, in 1978, the Supreme Court in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, for the first time, directed the executive and the legislature to follow not the legislature, but the executive to follow the due process of law, since the due process of law was not followed as far as the impounding of the passport was concerned of the petitioner. Now, due process of law came into being at this stage, and thereafter it has been followed by the executive to the tooth and nail. Now, what has happened that after the Maneka Gandhi case, which started with the following of due process of law, in 1980, there was a case called Vishaka versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court came to the rescue of all the women who were sexually harassed in the place of work. And they framed guidelines for the private sector as well as the government sectors to follow the guidelines where there will be no sexual harassment for the working women. Now, in that case, the guidelines were not there at all in any of the law, and the legislature took into consideration the guidelines framed by the Supreme Court, and the law was passed on the same guidelines as the Supreme Court had framed. So that was one of the very successful guidelines which were framed by the Supreme Court in judicial activism and were followed by the legislature. Now, as far as the adoption is concerned, in adoption also, there was no law as such for inter-country adoption by foreigners from India. In there also, the rules were framed by the Supreme Court and they were implemented by the executive so that the law could be formed in such case. And then the bill came into being and the law was passed. Now, going to the Constitution again, the segregation of powers has been given by the Constitution itself. And the Constitution's basic structure, as far as that is not destroyed, the judicial activism is all right. And it is in fact in the favor of the citizens of this country, because legislation does not give each and every thing. That is, the law is very old. The amendments have to be there. And for making such amendments, there is a process which takes a long time. Like the sexual harassment case, when the guidelines were given, they were followed and the law came into being as far as the basic thing of Vishaka versus Union of India. Now, what has happened that the state, which is, we have to see the changing times and accordingly apply the law. This was done from many years, and gradually the process of judicial activism was seen at the peak when the Supreme Court called for the cases, all the corona cases from all these states, and took it to themselves the responsibility of overlooking and monitoring the corona situation as far as oxygen supply is concerned, as far as vaccination is concerned. And that was very much criticized by all the lawyers fraternity for taking the role of the legislature. Not only that, the Advocate General, the senior Advocate General, Mr. Venugopal, snubbed the Supreme Court in Attorney General. Venugopal, the Attorney General, snubbed the Supreme Court and stated that it is the legislative function and it be with them. Therefore, the Supreme Court took a U-turn and again gave the legislature its responsibility to monitor the corona oxygen supply, also vaccination and other things. Now, as far as the judicial activism is concerned, it is good for the citizens as far as the judicial overreach is not there. Overreach is trampling on the legislature. And in fact, when the budget was passed and the budget was criticized by the Supreme Court, then the late luminary advocate, the great legal luminary, Mr. Jaitley, he was minister, and he said that slowly and steadily, the edifice of Indian legislation is being destroyed. That should not be the case. And the ego should not come that we are supreme. The supremacy, in establishing the supremacy, the Supreme Court should not trample, or the High Court should not trample on the legislation or the executive. Now, what has happened that in the name of activism, the Supreme Court is acting as if they are going to frame the laws, and that cannot be done because there is a narrow demarcation between activism and overreach, and that has to be understood very well. As far as the overreach is not there, judicial activism has been very much beneficial to the Indian people and the courts. Now, the concept of PIL was introduced about 2 decades back, and 3 decades back rather, and the PILs now, the locus standi, which was there in the writ jurisdiction, is not applicable to the public interest litigations. And any person aggrieved with public body or the person who is acting on behalf of public body can be made a party, and a person can file a public interest litigation in the High Court and the Supreme Court. Now, this PIL concept has increased so much that the courts are overburdened with PILs. And so many times now the High Court and the Supreme Court are in fact imposing fines, heavy fines to the petitioner when the subject is not called for. Now, as far as the making of laws is concerned, the legislature is making laws, are amending the laws as far as the changing times are concerned, and keeping in line, the judiciary is taking care that they do not do judicial overreach, except for few matters. Like, also I remember in the matter where the central government was, the state governments were rather conducting their own tests for medical entrance, the Supreme Court took a decision against the state and said that the central government will conduct a single NEET, that is NEET, that is the National Eligibility Entrance Test for the students, and all the admissions were centralized. That were not even fully digested by the states, as the power for conducting tests were taken away from them. So that was also one of the case of judicial activism. Now, as far as the center is concerned, the center is always in tune with the Supreme Court's judgments, and as well as in High Courts, it is in tune with the central government as well as the state government. I have appeared in various public interest litigations wherein the judges tried so many times to snub the executive in not following the directions given by the High Court or the Supreme Court. Now, in this case, I would like to say that every word which has been pronounced by the High Court or the Supreme Court is not possible to implement by the executive for the laws that are made. They have to abide by it. And as far as the basic structure of the constitution is not disturbed, I think so. Judicial activism is good for the citizens of India. This is what I feel, as far as the overreach is not there. And according to me, as far as overreach is also concerned, that may not be like taking over the power of the states by the Supreme Court, which the states can do better, like recent decision of this corona. And then the review filed by the Supreme Court Bar Association for giving away the power of the states to implement the corona guidelines. This is what I want to say. And the judicial activism today we see is at the peak. Thank you so much for giving me the chance.
Thank you very much, Advocate Jyoti Pawar, for giving your views. Although we all know that the time is limited, so I have no other option to give the limited time. But what Advocate Pawar has made one point very clear. She says judicial activism is good for the public at large, but judicial overreach should not be there. If the judicial overreach is not there, then the judicial activism is not a problem. And she has given the example of the latest where the Supreme Court called upon all the COVID cases on just an oral submission of the Attorney General, and they have appointed amicus the Harish Salve advocate, which was opposed tooth and nail by the senior advocates as well as the Bar Council of India. They have issued a public statement. They filed a review, and in that they have to because there were some allegations against that then CGI of India that he is being the class fellow of Mr. Harish Salve. That's why they are entertaining, and he's been appointed. Although Mr.
Yes.
Harish Salve is in London, sitting in London, how he knows the conditions of COVID in the country. So when that is one of the kind where according to Bar Council of India advocates and those who have filed this, that is a judicial activism shown by even the Supreme Court like this. Anyway, thank you very much, Advocate Jyoti Pawar, for giving your views. Definitely, I would like to come again and ask a question to you, but that is the next round. Now, I would like to invite my next guest, and he is Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma. Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma is a leading lawyer of Western UP with more than 41 years of practice. He is regularly appearing in Supreme Court and different high courts, including Allahabad, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi, Andhra Pradesh, High Court, etc. He is extensively practicing constitutional, civil and taxation matters. He is also rendering social services. He is Secretary of Kans Nikandan Trust, Mathura. He is Founder Secretary of Civil Lawyers Forum and President thereafter. Welcome, Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma. Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma, you have heard what Advocate Jyoti Pawar has mentioned. And you have heard the report which I read, where the top two luminary of India has given, they mentioned that the judicial activism is good. Although we know that the lawyers change their views, which suits them at the time. But we would like to know from you, judicial activism in India. Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma, please.
Yeah, Mr. Goyal, first I would like to make it clear that lawyers choose to change their view for the purpose of their client, not for the purpose of webinar. That is simply academic matter. Okay. So coming to the topic, Mr. Goyal, first I would like to congratulate you for selecting such an important topic. You are really trying to educate the public at large on such important topics. Coming to the topic, every democratic system of the governance is having three major components: legislature, executive, and judicial. In the constitutions of the countries, generally there is bifurcation of powers for all three ingredients. Our constitution is also having provisions for specific powers of all the three components. And all the three components are independent to each other, and they are free to exercise their powers, whatever have been given in the constitution. Judiciary is having a right to review of the actions of legislature and executive. Under Article 13 of the Constitution, judiciary has been given a power to struck down any law enacted by the parliament or state legislature if it is contravening any of the provision or fundamental right of the Constitution. So that power is being called power of judicial review. Now, there is a slight difference in between judicial activism and judicial review. Power of judicial review is a statutory power given by the Constitution under Article 30. But judicial review is something more, judicial activism is something more than that. But prior to that, I would like to say that in our Constitution also, separation of powers of all the three components is already there. Balance of power is also there. And furthermore, principle of checks and balance is also there. So that one may not misuse or grab the powers of the other. Now, coming to judicial activism, it is a principle of judicial decision whereby the judges allow their views to guide their decisions. And this generally happens when the acts are silent on the point or the acts are not in accordance with the conditions of the society. So in those situations, judges have to make their views independently from the statute itself. And then at that point, this judicial activism comes into play. There are so many reasons for the judicial activism. First theory of the judicial activism is being said, the filling up lacuna. This filling up of lacuna generally happens because of legislatures cannot foresee all the eventualities and further contingencies in enacting the law. So many gaps remains there. Then it is the duty of the judiciary to fill up those gaps. Further, executive also does not fulfill their duties as provided by the law. Then also it is the duty of the judiciary to compel the executive to perform the lawful functions. And this is being called the filling up of vacuum filling up theory. Then the second theory is the theory of social want. This theory of social want starts when some law is required, but the legislatures are not enacting it, or when some law is required to be amended and the legislatures are not amending it, then it is a social want, and it gives a responsibility on the judiciary to enact those laws which are required by the society, or to amend those laws which legislature is not doing. Generally, this is being called the judicial activism. But it is generally, I will say, like mostly, it is for the welfare of the public at large. As Mrs. Pawar has given some examples, Visakha case, no such law was there in India at all. So Supreme Court has given the judgment and made specific guidelines that at the workplace for women and to save the women from the crime, the certain guidelines are to be followed by the every workplace owner. And later on, several years later on, it was enacted into the shape of law. That principle of collegium for appointment of High Court and Supreme Court judges, it is also in the shape of a guideline. And it is being followed till today, and no such law has been enacted by the government, either central or the state. Only central can enact such law, but no such law has been enacted. That is also there. Then furthermore, in very recently, on 22nd of April, this 2021, a judgment has been passed by Honorable Supreme Court, whereby certain guidelines have been framed for the trial courts trying the civil suits. It is generally being known that the civil suits are taking very much lengthy procedure, having very much lengthy procedure, and take much time to decide. So Supreme Court has several times said that law should be amended so that this time should be shortened. But no such amendment has been passed, and such amendments were passed in 2020, but they were not for good at all. They couldn't change the procedure, or I should say they could not shorten the time of the litigation. So now, by way of this judgment, Supreme Court has given a direction to the state and the central government to amend the law. And furthermore, a specific guideline has been framed for the trial courts, directing that till the amendments are being made by the state or the central government, then the legislatures pass the law according to the procedure. Till then, these guidelines are to be followed. Now, this is important that these guidelines does not exist at all in the Code of Civil Procedure. They are beyond the law, beyond the existing law, but they are necessarily to be changed, which legislatures have not changed. So guidelines have been framed by the Supreme Court and they are having a binding effect on the court's floor. Now, this judicial activism is generally being criticized with this allegation that Supreme Court or High Courts are exceeding their powers. I totally disagree with this because as per our constitution, the roots of judicial activism are very much there in our constitution. Number one, Article 13, whereby it gives a specific power to the High Court or Supreme Court to nullify any law either existing at the time of passing of the constitution, because of I will like to explain it. All the previous laws of British period were adopted as it is at that time. But under Article 13 is already made clear that if any of the existing law is in contravention of the provisions of the constitution, the judiciary may strike down. And the second provision of Article 13 that any law made thereafter, if it contravenes the provisions of the constitution, the same may be struck down by the High Court or the Supreme Court. So the roots for that activism are very much there. By this Article 13, definitely Supreme Court or High Courts are having a overhand over the legislature and the judiciary. Then, with regard to this is with regard to the first point, then filling up of the lacuna. Then the second point, second theory of the activism for social one. As the legislatures are not enacting the laws which are required by the society, then Article 142 is there in the Constitution, which provides that Supreme Court can frame the law by way of its judgment. And it is very important to be noted that law judgment framed given by this passed by the Supreme Court shall be binding on all, including the governments, as if the same has been passed as a law by the legislatures. So whatever guidelines have been framed by the Supreme Court, either in Visakha case, Collegium, or this CPC case, or in so many other matters also, they are having a binding effect as if a law passed by the legislatures as per Article 142 of the Constitution. That's why I say the roots of judicial activism are very much there in our Constitution. And this judicial activism cannot be said to be beyond the powers of the Constitution. It is very much there. Now, the problem is when this power is to be exercised and when this is not to be exercised. I am remembering two particular periods in the history of judiciary of India when these powers were either not exercised or very less exercised. The first period was emergency period. This is Gandhi's period from 75 to 77. At that time, no such judicial activism, no such judgment was passed at all. Rather, whatever judgment were passed, they were passed just to please the government. I would like to say that actually at that time, judiciary totally surrendered before the government. And the extreme example of that surrender is the ADM Jabalpur case, in which the point was that whether a police can shoot out any person without filing a FIR and without making any trial in a court of law at all. And that judgment Supreme Court said within the emergency period. And that judgment Supreme Court said, yes, police can do. So it was extreme. This judgment was later on superseded, overruled. And the judges of this bench, Justice Bhagwati, Justice Chanchud, they made a specific apology to the nation that our judgment was wrong. But in the entire that emergency period, judiciary totally surrendered before the government. And the second period is from 2015 or 16 to up till now. This period also, not to that extent, but a little less than that. But judiciary generally seems to be surrendered before the government. The example which you have also given and Mrs. Pawar has also given about the corona guidelines, actually the intention behind that suo motu powers doesn't seems to be proper at all, because as it was apparent that Supreme Court is passing generally the orders in favor of the government. UP government, Allahabad High Court passed an order that 5 districts lockdown should be imposed. Appeal was preferred on the very next day. This order was passed immediately, when actually the lockdown was required. Anyway, as the different high courts were passing some orders criticizing the government and some directions were issued. And the first day when this procedure is started, the view of the then Honorable Chief Justice was that as separate orders are being passed and confusions are being created, so it is better to transfer all those cases to the Supreme Court so that one single order may be passed with regard to all the matters. And the impression was that this is being done to check the high courts from passing to the order criticizing the government. So that's why there was a criticize of that initial initiatives of the Supreme Court. And it was criticized that so many senior lawyers and the Supreme Court Bar Association also, Supreme Court Bar Association moved an specific application in the suo motu petition also. So that was the main reason. So intention behind that not good. But on very next day, when there was a hue and cry in the entire country, the Supreme Court took a U-turn. We don't want to transfer all those matters. So this was with regard to that intention. In collegium case also, why this collegium system began? Previously, the power to appoint the High Court or Supreme Court judges lies with the government. As this power was not exercised properly, rather some politically biased persons are being appointed as the judges, which also polluted the judiciary. So that was the reason that this judgment was passed in 1993 by the Honorable Supreme Court, and a collegium was created in the Supreme Court and in the High Courts also. That collegium will suggest the names and it will refer it to the government, and government will appoint those persons as judges. Government can return the name once only if again the collegium has passed that sent the same order. Government is bound to appoint that person as a judge of the High Court or the Supreme Court. This system was created. This is also being said the judicial activism. But as I have said, the roots are very much there under Article 142 of the Constitution. It is not beyond our Constitution also. Now, there is a little difference furthermore, as Mrs. Pawar has also said, judicial overreach. The judicial overreach generally is said when it is absolutely beyond the legal provisions, when some orders are being passed beyond the legal provisions. Now, it is again yet to be looked into. If actually it is being passed for the welfare of the public at large, it will not be said to be a judicial overreach. Rather, it will come in the definition of the judicial activism. But if the same judgment has been passed due to some political reasons, then it is overreach and it is against the provisions of law. Slight hairline differences there. So it is generally on the intentions of the judges of the passing the orders, which makes the order whether it is judicial activism or it is judicial overreach. Judicial overreach does not seem to be a proper thing, but judicial activism is always for the welfare of the public at large, and it is necessary for the public at large. In the last, I would like to say that as per the changing norms of the society, new interpretations are always required. You have just seen a few years back, Section 377 has been partially decriminalized by the judgment of the Supreme Court. It may be said to be a requirement of the time. So many other judgments have also been passed in the same way, like the right of a daughter in the property of the father, then the right of a daughter-in-law to reside in the property of the father-in-law. So many other judgments which are requirement of the time. And this is a matter of interpretation of law. So in those judgments, the judges have interpreted the law in favor of the public at large. Especially if we read the provision, such interpretation does not seem to be in there. But as they have interpreted it, and they are having a binding force of law, and these laws are always in favor or for the welfare of the public at large. So this judicial activism is a very much requirement of a strong democracy. If this judicial activism is not there, suppose, then these political persons are generally having an ill will. They generally act only and only in the interest of their vote banks. They doesn't act for the interest of the public at large or the entire nation. There is also a difference in between the interest of a vote bank and the interest in the nation. Judiciary is expected to be act in the interest of the nation. Political persons may act for the interest of the vote bank. So for that purpose, to beneficiate the entire nation, this judicial activism is very much required. But definitely, judicial activism may not be misused, because of the misuse of judicial activism will make it judicial overreach. So judicial activism is necessary, not the judicial overreach, and it is definitely well in the welfare of the public at large and required for a strong democracy. That's all.
Thank you, Advocate Sharma, for giving your views. One point which he has highlighted is under Article 142 in the Constitution. The courts have power, the Supreme Court have power, or the High Court have power to amend, change, or enact new law, even if it is not passed by the legislature. So there is no, according to him, there is no judicial activism. Yes, overreach is, according to him, also, if it is overreach, is also unfortunate. We should not go for that. Thank you very much, Advocate Sharma. Paucity of time, so I will go fast. Now I will call my next panelist, and he is Advocate Puneet Chaturvedi. Advocate Puneet Chaturvedi is advocates and consultants of High Court, Mumbai. He belongs to a family of lawyers for 4 generations since his great-grandfather's time, having associate law office across India. He has been practicing as an arguing counsel for the last 29 years and regularly appearing in the Supreme Court of India and various high courts across India. He has a distinction of having appeared in almost all the high courts of India. Besides being a practicing lawyer, Advocate Chaturvedi has taken LLM and LLB lectures in the University of Mumbai and other law colleges. He has also been addressing the annual law training lectures series conducted by Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa on the Constitution of India. Advocate Chaturvedi has been writing legal articles and columns in magazines and websites, besides conducting lectures and workshops on law at several institutions, corporate houses, jails, medical forums, bar associations, etc. His articles and speeches are widely hailed. Welcome, Advocate Puneet Chaturvedi, on our show. Advocate Puneet Chaturvedi, you have heard Advocate Jyoti Pawar as well as Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma, and both have given their views, and according to them, that judicial activism is good, not bad, but overreach is not good. Now, we would like to know from you the judicial activism in India. Advocate Puneet Chaturvedi, please. Please unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Goyal. I heard extensively the views of Ms. Jyoti Pawar and Advocate Ramesh Sharma ji. They have given quite elaborate, detailed views about the judicial activism and how that is good for the nation and bad is that outreach which sometimes is being made by the judiciary. Now, if you remember, right from the time of our scriptures, the ancient scriptures have always warned ati sarvatra varjit. That means the moment you cross the line, there's always a sense of dissatisfaction about you, howsoever good your intentions may be. Now, the question which comes to my mind is, as far as this wonderful topic of today is concerned, that why is there a need of judicial activism? The need arose because of a vacuum of intellectual legislation and intellectual and discretionary executive. I just remember what Lord Disraeli has once said. He had warned the people, because democracy was very popular form of the government in that era, and almost every nation was opting for democracy, leaving monarchy. So he defined democracy by stating that democracy runs by majority, and majority consists of fools. Now, if anybody is offended, sue Lord Disraeli, not me. I'm simply quoting. Now, unfortunately, this majority of fools have reached to the positions of power. They are the ones who are dominating without having a background of proper study and research. I'll give you an example. What kind of an executive system we have? We are simply carrying on of the system left by British. Now, the British had their own compulsions, their own vested interests. I'll give you an example. Today, who's executive? The executive is primarily the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy, the test of intelligence is to clear your competitive exam. Now, the moment somebody clears a competitive exam of IAS, IPS or something, he suddenly becomes a great intellectual to the heights of being Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. He knows every answer to everything. Think of a person who has devoted his life in a particular field. A person who has devoted his life for environment. A person who has devoted his life for waterworks or water management. But he shall be subjugated to a person who has cleared this IAS exam and sitting on the top. Having no knowledge about water management or environment, or for example, finance, or whatever field you want to. The major decisions are being taken by those who have no experience at all. Now, same applies on law. Who's making law? Do you think that what the idea or the projection given is that the parliament make laws or the respective legislative assemblies of the states make law? But do they do actually? Do you think they have these, the political class has this intellectual sense to make law? I'm sorry. But they can't stand and talk to you for 10 minutes to grab your attention. They'll just talk nonsense. So who ultimately makes these laws? the drafting and the laws are made by these very bureaucratic. These bills, the drafts are being presented to these ministers who put it before the parliament, and they vote and they debate. And what do they debate? It's very unfortunate. If you ever devote some time to witness Lok Sabha TV or Rajya Sabha TV, you will find what kind of debates happen. It's pathetic. And that's where you find that you are at a better place in courts, where at least the debate happens in a proper sense and sensible manner. You don't talk nonsense in courts, but in the parliament, most of the talks are nonsense. Now, what happens is, these people who have no expertise in any area, but being the bureaucratic in a position, they are the deciding factors. And the people who have experience in particular areas, they're specialists. What they are supposed to do, even if there is some mercy being shown to them by the government and they're appointed as advisor, their advice is only taken to the level of advice only. That's not a binding factor. If it suits to the bureaucracy, then that advice is taken. If it doesn't, it's thrown in the dustbin. And the bureaucracy decides what to do, what not to do. One more area I want to bring into your notice. Since the inception of independence, you may have heard several budgets. Every year there is a budget given by the finance minister and the parliament. Now, if you have not noticed, I'm inviting your attention to take note this time around whenever the budget is declared. What are the allocations? Primarily, major allocations are to the infrastructure, health, defense, Garibi Hatao, Manrega, this, that. Do any of you remember any major budget being allocated to judiciary or for the law? You don't even know what is a minuscule allocation. And that is why the law is suffering. So we have to understand the root cause of this activism being taking place. Why is it happening? Do you know that what you call as activism is basically a mandatory position? You are under compulsion. If you remember one court of the Supreme Court of India who has said that if you do not want to follow our orders, shut the courts. That was the level of frustration of the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Forget about these lower courts. How do they function? One of my friends, I'm just giving an anecdote to keep things under perspective. One of my friends whose son is now working in US, during vacation went to US. And when he came back, he narrated. He said, I just went to my son and I wanted to watch their Supreme Court. So I asked my son that, can I visit the Supreme Court of US? And my son, who is working into IT industry, arranged for a car with a driver. The driver took me. I scolded the driver. I want to go to court. Why have you brought me to the 5-star hotel? And the driver, who an innocent person, says that, so this is the court. So this friend of mine was narrating that when I went inside the court, he was talking in a satirical fashion, stating that, यार मजा नहीं आया, वो कोर्ट देख के ना, अरे अंदर फवारे चल रहे हैं, खुशबू आ रही है, चारों तरफ एसी लगा हुआ है, बड़े बड़े सोफा लगे हैं, कियोस्क लगे हुए हैं, सेल्फ डायरेक्टिंग, टेलीविजन सेट्स लगे हैं, आपको टाइम अगर वो करना है, गेस्ट रूम्स बने हैं. ये कोई कोर्ट होता है? एक भी टूटी कुर्सी दिखी नहीं हमको, एक भी कोई दीवार पे जाले नहीं दिखे मकड़ी के, कोई पीलिंग ऑफ प्लास्टर नहीं दिखा. ये कोई कोर्ट है? मजा नहीं आया. अभी कोर्ट आके यहाँ पे आके जरा फील हो रहा है, हाँ, नाउ वी हैव बैक इनटू द कोर्ट. ये है consequence of not getting any allocations of budget towards the court, because the government, the respective governments, do not want the courts to be very strong. They want this lethargic system of judicial dispensation. They want the public at large to be engrossed in this judicial battle and do not pay attention to their inefficiencies. And that is where it becomes a compulsion for judiciary to take note of. And trust me, what Indian judiciary is doing is a wonder. Had there been any kind of measuring of these 7 wonders, judiciary must have been first wonder, Indian judiciary. Because in these compelling circumstances, what wonderful performances sometimes they do, you just get taken aback. If you remember Asiad labor case, it was one postcard written by one journalist, and that the Supreme Court took that postcard as a writ petition and issued orders. And what orders? If you read the reply submitted by the central government in that judgment, that what have we done? I'll just give you little brief facts that it was Asiad Games which India had bid for, never thinking that they'll win, but they won. So they were taken aback because there was no preparations for Asian Games. So suddenly Delhi was selected to host Delhi to Asian Games, and therefore metamorphosis change were happening in Delhi. But who will do that? The labor wanted. So the labor were migrated from Uttar Pradesh, Bengal, Bihar, Punjab, all neighboring states, Haryana. But where would these laborers stay? So makeshift tents were made. Water pipelines were drawn. So one journalist saw that these laborers were living in inhuman conditions. And they were making accommodations for the players to come. So some photographs were clicked, and on a postcard attached with those photographs, this was sent to the Supreme Court of India. And the Chief Justice took it as a writ petition, that postcard, and issued notices to the central government that why these people are not given proper accommodation. Are they not citizens of India, not entitled for the Article 21 of the Constitution of India? And the Supreme Court said, we are providing water, food, shelter, money, everything. What else do you want? And then the Supreme Court, looking to one of the photographs where a lady was taking a bath in open and other laborers were surrounding there. The children were playing in the mud. And there the Supreme Court had that a lady to take bath in privacy is her right to life. Expanding the interpretation of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. That was the expansion given. Just read Article 21. It's a one-line innocuous article in the Constitution of India. But what kind of expansion given by judiciary? A lady to take bath in privacy is a matter of her dignity. If you snatch the dignity, you're actually snatching her life. So it's a right to life. Similarly, in MC Mehta's judgment, right to breathe pure air is being brought within the ambit of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Right to have a potable drinking water brought within the Article 21 of the Constitution of India. All this is being done. And when it does not suit to certain vested sections of the society, they say this is judicial activism. Now, Ms. Pawar had quoted, and also Mr. Sharma has talked about, Vishakha's judgment. Do you remember Vishakha's judgment was passed in the year 1997, whereas Protection of Women from Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act has come in 2013. So it took 16 years to the government to make a statute where the guidelines were properly drawn by the Supreme Court. And just see the act, it's a verbatim of Vishakha's judgment, Vishakha's guideline. So the central government had nothing to do. It's just to copy, cut, paste, and pass a legislation. But still, it took 16 years for them to do that. This shows the mental insolvency of the two major limbs of our governance, the legislation and the executive. What to do? Now, as you both the previous speakers have rightly stated, that sometimes it happens, it's very natural that in your enthusiasms, you cross the line and then it becomes judicial outreach. And it is rightly condemnable. But that does not mean that there is no avenue left if suppose even the judicial activism, had that not been there, where would the citizenry go to speak about their woes? Who listens to them? If you go to a political person today to tell him about your woes, he treats you as if he's doing some kind of ihsan on you. There are certain laws where the appeal provision is given to the ministry. I'll tell you, as far as the state of Maharashtra is concerned, there's a statute called MRTP. Now, MRTP's appeal goes to the minister. Once, it's a personal experience I'm sharing with you, once I got the opportunity to appear before the minister, I was engaged, and I'm basically being an arguing counsel. I simply go to argue the matter. When I reached to Mantralaya, the minister was missing. And the PA to the minister called my client and told him, "Arey vakil sahab ko kyun laya hai? Apan aapas mein samajh lete." At least you don't find this in the courts. Have you ever come across this situation in the courts that the judge is missing and the PA is saying, "Aa jao, hum log aapas mein samajh lete." So the courts are basically the savior in this nation. And trust me, as I gave you example that these great bureaucrats having no experience take decisions, the courts never do that. And that is why the courts appoint amicus curiae. If the court does not understand a concept, the court appoints amicus curiae. The court appoints experts. The court calls experts to give their say. Then that is read and understood, and then a judgment is given. The judges never take their wisdom to that level that they don't understand the concept and they pass the order. Unlike bureaucracy, here there is no ego issue. I've been appearing in a matter where there was a very complex corporate situation was there. And the judges did not understand, and they openly said in the court that, Mr. Chaturvedi, we would need some experts to understand it. And they brought the accounting experts. They appointed, and they explained the situation to the judges, and then the judge, and the judgment is a wonderful judgment. And what wonderful judgments are passed by the Honorable Supreme Court, where I'll tell you one situation where I'm yet to come across, and I challenge you, you may be a great literarian. You read any literature, including Milton, Shakespeare, Keats, Shelley, whoever, or Premchand or Jaishankar Prasad in Hindi. You still to find a better definition of women what Supreme Court of India has given.
You have to be brief, Mr. Chaturvedi.
Very well. I'm sorry, I just carried away.
No problem. No.
I'm sorry, I just
please continue.
I just got carried away. Sorry. You actually called me for a topic very near to my heart.
I understand.
But it is quite interesting.
Sorry, I carried on.
I'll
just tell you that I'll close with this remark: what Supreme Court has defined women, and I'm yet to find a better definition than that. And the Supreme Court has held that the modesty is the essence of being a woman. Can you beat that? No literature can give better definition of women than that. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry for crossing.
No. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chaturvedi.
In this activism, I went into outreach.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaturvedi. I will just add one thing. You mentioned about the bureaucracy. Yesterday, I was doing the vaccine confusion, and the immediate past president of national past president of IMA was on one of the panelists. He said very clearly, this government is not listening to anyone, a medical experts. Whatsoever is happening in the COVID, it's run by either the bureaucracy or the political bosses. They are not listening to the medical experts. That's why this havoc is going on of COVID in India. So what you are saying about the judiciary, about the legality, the same thing is for all the fields, until we will not have the specific specialist of those fields involved. We have, and sorry to say, in anyway, that I will come to the next point. Otherwise, I will also take time.
Sorry to interfere.
Yeah.
I'll just say one thing, as Mr. Chaturvedi was saying, that he should not make a general sweeping statement about the bureaucracy. As I have interacted in my government leadership with so many IAS officers who are the best in their field, and High Court makes such orders which could not be implemented at all.
Yeah.
Which could not be implemented at all.
Okay,
So
advocate. Advocate.
Yes.
Yeah, we will take it next in the next.
Sorry.
Okay. No issues. We will take in the next round.
Yes.
Now I will go to because otherwise she will not get, our next panelist will not get, although she understands that when the seniors are speaking. Anyway, now I would like to invite and introduce our next panelist, the last panelist, not the least, Advocate Kanishka Tyagi. Advocate Kanishka Tyagi is a practicing lawyer and a radio personality. She is currently heading Business Strategies Department of Legum Amicus, a young dynamic law firm based at Delhi. After graduating from Campus Law Center, Delhi University, Kanishka worked with a couple of law firms in Delhi. She joined Kaidan Boris, a global law firm, as partner in 2011. She handles matters and advises clients on corporate legal issues ranging from private equity, real estate compliances to POSH, etc. As a radio anchor, Kanishka has been presenting sports shows during major sports events, including Delhi Commonwealth Games, Cricket World Cup 2019, etc. Advocate Kanishka is a regular contributor to law magazines and journals, and regular speakers and guest faculties at conferences, seminars, law colleges, has addressed a wide variety of audiences at various platforms on corporate legal issues. Being a sports enthusiast, Advocate Kanishka has a special interest in sports law and has worked with a number of sports persons, federations, and leagues in sports-related legal issues. Welcome, Advocate Kanishka Sharma. You have heard all our earlier panelists. Now, I would like to come your views on the judicial activities in India. Advocate Kanishka Tyagi, please. Please be brief.
Yes, I'll be very brief. Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me, and good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be part of this panel. And my seniors who've spoken before me, Mr. Sharma, Madam Pawar, and Mr. Chaturvedi, all of them, three of them have beautifully defined.
Advocate Tyagi, can you just come? Advocate Tyagi, can you just come in the center? You are just at one side of the screen. Sure. Yes, please go ahead.
So have beautifully defined the topic of the day, and I've also given examples from the history, the precedents where courts use this tool, if I can use that term, of judicial activism or judicial overreach. And Mr. Chaturvedi, very, very beautifully, it was so good to hear him. I just didn't want to stop him and start speaking, but so beautifully just summarized in such a brief time, summarize the need for judicial activism. So here I agree with the views of my panelists here that we need judicial activism in India, firstly. And secondly, the roots, as Mr. Sharma mentioned, the roots of judicial activism they find place in our constitution itself, whether it is judicial review under 32 or 226. The power has been given to our courts to review the laws or policies which have been enacted and passed by legislature, either state legislature or union legislature. And also that power has been used time and again by our judiciary to find gaps and to fill those gaps. Judiciary, whenever there is this instance of being active or proactive, judiciary is criticized of being extremely proactive or more proactive than there is need. However, I don't know how do you define that, what is the extent of that power? How do you decide that in this instance, judiciary overreached and in this instance it did not? If I were just to give an example of a couple of judgments of judicial precedents, Supreme Court few years back passed a decision in a case where it's held that within 500 meters from state or national highways, the liquor stores could not operate. There was a section of society which criticized that decision on the basis that this power of enacting any law, firstly relating to liquor industry, alcohol industry, lies and rests with the state legislature, state governments, and not with the union government. So this was firstly a matter which should have been decided with respect to each state. And secondly, judiciary did not have power to make a policy on this particular issue. What they could have done is they could have advised the state governments possibly to come up with a policy or with a report that should we allow or not allow? Is there a direct linkage between the accidents that are caused on the highways and presence of these stores on the highways? However, all these factors were considered while giving this decision, while rendering this decision. But if you see, Mr. Sharma also mentioned that our courts are empowered, Supreme Court and High Courts are empowered to make guidelines, and that is the power which was used. On what? It's just that when you fall in one section of society which does not like that particular decision, you take the side and you are of the view that this is judicial overreach. And when the judicial decision just lies, it is in sync with what your views are, then you encourage this practice of being proactive by our judiciary. Similarly, this decision was quoted by Mr. Sharma, also section 377, which was repealed by Delhi High Court. So in this case also, there is a section of society which is absolutely against the people who are into same-sex relationship, and there is a section of society which itself is indulging in such things which are into same-sex relationships. So it's just that that in which, whether you like that particular decision or not, and on the basis of that you form that opinion whether it is judicial activism or judicial overreach. It is very difficult to define in what instance it is judicial activism and in what instance it is overreach. However, to take away that power from our courts will be totally against the basic principle which is enshrined in our constitution, and also morally it will not be right, as Mr. Chaturvedi pointed out, that laws are made to appease, to keeping in mind the voting banks. So many a time policies are made when you want to appease a section of society, or you feel that it is a populist move, it will give your party a good image, it will make a good image of your party and you will get votes and it will strengthen your voting banks. Also at times, there is absolutely void of law on certain topics. As was pointed out by my co-panelists, that after Vishakha guidelines were put in place, it took so many years that an actual legislation came into being. So when there are gaps there are areas where there exists absolutely no law, or there are areas where there is a law which exists on the law book, but it is either discriminatory towards a section of society or from some other angle, it needs to be reviewed. Then, in my understanding, courts have been using that power and should continue using that power to review the laws that are already existing, or to legislate also in form of guidelines or some sort of guidelines to guide the public at large and also the legislature. So also just one very brief point, that we vote for parties and we vote for our leaders at a regular interval after every 5 years, but we do not vote for each instance of policy making. So if we as nation or majority of people in our nation do not agree with the policy that has been enacted. And in such a situation, what is our recourse? That's true. There are other remedies also, but judicial activism in form of public interest litigation, that's a very good tool in hand of general public at large, through which they can approach, and this locus standi principle which has been removed, and anybody can approach court on any social issue. It's a great thing, because during those 5-year period, if you feel that some policy has been passed or enacted which is totally arbitrary use of power, or which is totally against the fundamental principles of enacting laws, then you, as a citizen, you have the right to approach courts. And as judiciary not only has power to deal with such an issue, but it has duty to deal with such an issue and to keep the executive in check and legislature in check.
Thank you very much, Advocate Tyagi. Everyone has mentioned about Vishaka. I can only say one thing. Even Supreme Court is not following the guidelines or the things in their own court, which we have seen in the earlier CGI case. So I don't know whether it's like called Hindi mein diya tale andhera. But anyway, court is court. Now my question goes to Advocate Pawar. Only 1 minute answer because we have paucity of time. Any decisions goes against government is termed judicial activism. Is it correct, Advocate Jyoti Pawar? Please unmute, please unmute, please unmute, please unmute, please unmute.
I won't say that, because judicial activism, in fact, is very good for the times which we are sailing into. But what has happened, that government, going against the government is not judicial activism, but protecting the rights of the citizens and underprivileged will be called as judicial activism, which is very good. And another thing which I want to make a very important point, that the IAS officers which I have dealt with today, that is the executive, are really very good in their own fields. And I feel that the judges, with due respect to them, they are not so wise to deal with each and every subject. And they should pass orders which can be implemented, which were very difficult as a government leader. I know that for the government to implement some orders, it was so difficult, and the judges made the bureaucrats, senior IAS officers, sit in the court for hours together and days together. That was very unfortunate.
Okay, thank you, Advocate Jyoti. We will definitely have one day we will keep a media conference on bureaucracy versus judiciary.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Now my question goes to Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma. Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma, giving oxygen, passing or using the word called genocide, or saying in the passing a not order but rather observing that a murder case to be filed against the Election Commission. Do you think it's a judicial activism?
Well, these are the observations of the high courts. These are not part of their order or the judgment. Judicial activism, we can say, if these things are become the part of the order or the judgment, they are simply observations made and passed over, that's all. But one thing I would like to say specifically, what Mr. Chaturvedi has said after 14 years Vishaka judgment, National Judicial Appointment Commission Act 2014 with regard to appointment of judges. 93 was the year when collegium judgment came. After 21 years of time, this judgment came, and it was drafted so badly that this act was struck down by the Supreme Court only because of its language is badly drafted and it amounts to an interference in the independence of the judiciary. This is the drafting skill of our bureaucrats.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now my question goes to Advocate Chaturvedi. Advocate Chaturvedi, where was the judicial activism of the Supreme Court? Why they have not banned the elections? Why they have not banned the Kumbh Mela? And everyone was knowing, a layperson was knowing that these are the super spreader of COVID. The people are going to suffer. Where was the judicial activism, so-called judicial activism of our courts? Advocate Chaturvedi, please unmute yourself. Please unmute.
That you have to ask to judiciary. I am not the part of judiciary. What they have done, what they have not done. If they have not done, they are subject to criticism. I am not part of that. So this question has
okay. But I think I got the answer. Even if you are not replying, I got the answer. Now my question goes to Advocate Tyagi. Advocate Tyagi, we are talking about the PILs only restricted to the Supreme Court and High Courts. There are lots of problems of the district level. Earlier, it was not that much, but now the DC or the district magistrate passing some orders or doing something locally, and people, or like we have seen the COVID time, local problems are coming, the hospitals, beds, this. Now somebody wants to get a relief. Why not the powers to be given to the district courts also for the local administration, not for the state, under the section whatsoever you will apply 226 or
no, there are
30.
other remedies. The person can also go for writ jurisdiction of high courts and
no,
Supreme
we are
Court.
not talking of high court. I'm talking of district court only.
See, it's not about granting that power to district court or at district level. There are courts who are empowered to take up that kind of things, PIL, and I don't think it should be delegated to lower courts. Lower courts are already overburdened, and Mr. Chaturvedi highlighted very well that in what are the conditions in which lower courts usually work.
Okay.
They are already overburdened with.
Okay. I think the fault lies with the court. When courts are collecting so much court fees, they should ban, they should stop. And they says all this money should be spent only the infrastructure of the courts, provide the online judiciary. Nowadays, even the district courts are not done, have that digital thing. They should not allow that money to go to the government, and let that money or the court fees, all the court fees, when they are filing a specific performance case, you all know that how much court fees comes. Every money should be given to the court only, and court should utilize it. Anyway, thank you very much. It's another topic we will definitely discuss. It's very, very difficult when so many leading advocates are there. It's very difficult to judge. I can understand the plight of the judge, how he has to listen and see to it how to control the advocates. Now, thank you very much for giving you such a very, very wonderful views. And today's program has been, so viewers, I will just tell one thing. Judicial activism is good. Everybody knows. But the only thing is, it should be done for the benefit of the public, not for the benefit of the government or the legislature or the executive. Because what we have seen in the past, many times judicial activism is giving, it's a partisan towards the government, which is wrong. We want that the judiciary should see the plight, and everybody knows the conditions where we are staying today. Thank you very much, all of our panelists. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Newsgaon se Samvad Sarokar News, as well as it was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor is to bring to you every day new thing. But today, as you know, for last 3-4 days, we are doing every day evening program, daily evening program we have started. And that is for half an hour only. And that is Hindi. And today, Kal Aaj aur Kal Lal Goyal ke sang, our chief guest is Mr. Narottam Mishra, IRS, former Director General of Income Tax, Ahmedabad. Now he is going to, we will unfold his life history. It's like an autobiography of a person, how he started his life and how he has reached on the top, and what his message to the young generation. So please tune in at 4:30 p.m. today for Kal Aaj aur Kal Lal Goyal ke sang. Thank you very much, Advocate Jyoti Pawar. Thank you very much, Advocate Puneet Chaturvedi. Thank you very much, Advocate Ramesh Kumar Sharma. And thank you very much, Advocate Kanishka Tyagi, for enlightening us for this very, very relevant topic. But I know that the time is short, very less. So definitely we'll keep one more session on this. Thank you, all the viewers, for watching.